Hi, my name is Rachel Togetto, and I will be talking about the history of metal music. Have you ever had one of those days where you get in your car after a long shift and all you want to do is scream? The woman previously that you were talking to in front of the counter was just screaming at you that they want to talk to the manager, but you know that if you do that, your manager's just going to say the same exact thing. Well, you would not be alone in feeling the same kind of seething rage that I would be. Lucky for you, there's an entire genre of metal music originating in the mood of disenfranchised youth on the margins of society. Ever since the turn of the century, new artists have been attempting to break the mold and create new genres of music using the technologies and emotions derived from the constant change in our perception of the world around us, and metal music is no exception to this. I want to take you through the history of metal music and its origins, starting from the very beginning all the way to present day. So let's start in the 1960s to 1970s, when metal music began. Metal music started with the hard rock of the 1960s through British invasion groups of the early rock musicians such as the Beatles, Rolling Stones, and the Kinks. According to Masterclass, Heavy Metal Music Guide, within the early 1970s, the economic growth that Britain was experiencing after World War II began to come to a halt and unemployment began to rise. This period of economic distress was marked by inflation, labor strikes, and economic decline. Black Sabbath is argued to be the first heavy metal music band created from this economic unrest, their music reflecting the feelings of the general public and gave a voice to this feeling of desolation. This first wave of music was categorized as a mix of granite rock and unearthly vocals like Ozzy Osbourne, with a lyrical focus on the supernatural and macabre, which is a very common theme found within modern metal music still to this day. The first wave of heavy metal music reached the rock and roll scene in America, while the style was adopted by hard rock bands that New World Encyclopedia categorizes as MC5, Alice Cooper, Kiss, and groups like AC/DC exploded through the new heavy metal music sounds. While metal was becoming very popular in England, as I said before, it did start to make its way into the hard rock scene in America, where its popularity absolutely boomed. Now I want to take you into the 80s to the 90s scene. Within the 80s decades, metal groups such as Ozzy Osbourne and Van Halen began to pop up left and right. Bands such as Iron Maiden as well, Saxon, and Motorhead all added their contribution towards the rising metal popular genre. As I said before, Van Halen and Ozzy Osbourne were actually the first heavy metal acts that gained time on places like MTV and mainstream media, which allowed them to further propel the genre of metal. In an article detailing the timeline of metal music's history, Bob Thurn, within the 80s, the metal music that was created was characterized by a purist contingent, focusing on pummeling riffs and multi-guitar attacks. That was labeled as the new wave heavy British metal. The 80s metal scene was all about the glitz and the glam, being declared the pop metal scene that focused on love songs and hairspray, while groups like Metallica were helping subgenres like thrash metal, power metal take form, where fast-paced tempos and extreme guitar solos were most popular. The 1990s marked a change in the typical heavy metal characteristics that defined the genre. Emerging groups such as Slipknot, Marilyn Manson, and added an even more aggressive and energetic tone to the already angry and vicious heavy metal that was being created. Groove metal was highly popularized subgenre of metal music within the 90s period, which both Slipknot and groups like Marilyn Manson contributed towards. This subgenre combined elements of hardcore punk and thrash metal that focused on rhythms, aggressive vocals, and down-tuned guitars are the sounds of this subgenre. With groups like Slipknot and Marilyn Manson gaining popularity, the 2000s were no exception to a rise in new sound-defying hardcore sounds. So now I'm going to take you to the early 2000s to present day, starting in the very early 2000s. This categorized more and more subgenre metals that were being created, with one of the most popular being deathcore. Deathcore incorporated elements of heavy metal and metalcore. Death growling, pig squealing sounds, and screaming were all extremely popular sounds to use during this time period, and honestly what most people currently associate metal music to be. In the mid-2000s, resurgence in the classical metal scene began to gain popularity once again. Paying tribute to the original pioneers of the music, Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin were these retro metal groups were created from. The Illuminati, Witchcraft, and The Sword helped in a repopularization of metal music as being less intimidating. After the tech boom in the late 2000s and early 2010s, apps such as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify allowed anybody to gain access to this genre of music. The popularity of these music apps allowed for people from all demographics and backgrounds to listen to metal music over its 100 subgenres. Apps such as TikTok, formed in the late 2010s, allowed for a more diverse population to become informed about the many subgenres and alternative fashion specifically of metal music. The website Ultimate Guitar goes into the public's new perception of heavy metal music, and its new influences of previous music. This specific writer demonstrates the importance of these new age apps on the heavy metal music scene, as previously said. Groups like Sleep Token, Ginger, and Spiritbox are all examples of the power of social media within the music scene. For example, here is an album of Sleep Token that is my own personal album. However, apps like TikTok and YouTube have allowed these groups to propel the genre into a new sphere of recognition with the general population, with music containing catchy lyrics and singers with charisma, and a platform to be able to demonstrate their band's capabilities. They have become a very good gateway group for the average person to get into metal music and allow for an outpour of support and love for this genre of music. As I wrap up explaining the history of metal music and its metamorphosis into the sound-defying genre it is today, metal has reformed and compressed itself into a multitude of different subgenres matching the decade's interests and continuing frustrations with society. We as humans have had such a short time on Earth, and it's extremely important that we allow ourselves to open up and listen to new sounds that might be outside of our comfort zones. There will always be a genre of music dedicated to match how you're feeling at any moment, at any given moment in time, and the history of metal music is saturated in the hearts and minds of people discontent with our modern world. Thank you so much for listening.